Okay? I'm going to move on to just some last sort of housekeeping stuff. You're selecting only one focus area for each application. On your cover page, this is your cover page, and you're telling us some really general information, and this helps us create summaries, so we appreciate when you do this. List all your other strategies that are requesting funding. This helps us know if you've got a request in 3 different focus areas. That helps us do some coordinating behind the scenes. We do not share with the solutions teams. If you've got a proposal in health, if you've got a proposal in youth development, the volunteers don't know that. They're making decisions independent of that. We've been asked, if volunteers know that I'm going to get money from some other pot, is it easier for them to sort of cut, or are they just making sure that we get the same amount of money, but maybe not from the same places? None of that is part of their decision making. Okay, this is for us. And yes, we know what you got in fiscal 2011, but again, we use these forms to create some quick summaries for the volunteers because they don't remember. And apparently they don't save all the material we give them. So, guidelines for the narrative, we've been through a lot of this. Your labeling really, really helps. And our RFPs are all Word documents, right? Out on the website. So just pull up the RFP document on our website, copy and paste all the headings on it, okay? It just will help the volunteers. Because having been a grant reader myself, sometimes you go, what question are they answering? Tell them what question I am answering.
Leslie, there aren't actually headings on the questions, but if you notice there are on all these slides, so you can use those as your headings. But the most important thing is to use the question numbers, one or 3 or whatever.
Whatever they said. At the end, they'll stand up and tell you everything I said that was wrong. Write it down. Table of contents. This does not count as one of your 20 pages. Please do it. It's helpful. Keeps things organized. If a volunteer drops their stack of stuff, it helps them. Another tool might be that in the footer of your document, you put the name of your agency and the name of your strategy. Again, because it helps those things. Attachments do not count as part of your 20. If you have questions about attachments, please ask. So 20 pages. Again, if a graph tells your information better than narrative, put it in. Bullet points, brevity, and the questions that they're suggesting are really important. Quantify, quantify, quantify. Who, what, when, where, why. Key questions. You should be able to read your narrative and determine which of those questions, not just the question I asked you, but why do I do this work? For whom do I do this work? How many people? This is pretty basic stuff. Collate your document. So if for some reason, and this happened last time, you are sending your documents in multiple chunks, for whatever reason you might do that, please label the document. So when you save it electronically, your agency name, I do this all the time. People send me stuff, and they're sending this form to multiple people. And so I forget to save it with a different name, so I send my response back, and it's named just like the form they sent me. And so now they have 20 responses, all named exactly the same. Whenever you send us something, use your agency initials, whatever that is, part of your strategy name, or something that tells us what it is. And then if you have multiple parts, part 1 or part A, or whatever that is, because we can't spend our time collating your materials when we prepare it for the volunteers. So it's in your best interest to make sure that that is really clear, okay? So they know how to put your proposal together, and we do too. That's really, those are the highlights. The other thing, we had a question come in about whether or not staff would read drafts of proposals. We will not, okay? It puts us in the place of being your editor. We can't afford the time to read everyone's drafts. And if we did it for one competitor in the process and not another, it could create a feeling of unfair advantage. We will have conversations with you. We will talk through strategies with you. We are very glad to spend that time one-on-one, but we will not be your editor, and we will not read drafts of proposals. Okay? So you can ask us for feedback. What do you think about that? Is that clear to you? And we're glad to do that. And we're glad to answer questions to the best of our ability. If you have a question about one of our questions or one of our tools, please ask. We truly want to help everyone feel like they're equipped to proceed with all the tools that they need to feel successful. Okay?
One question about submission. So the stuff, what has to be uploaded into the database, do you want us to make that all into one, or should they be separate? So like it's the cover page, the narrative.
I'd love it all. My ideal world is that you scan or somehow assemble your entire proposal into one document that you upload, because that ensures, especially if you've turned it into a PDF, that ensures that the document that left your house gets to our house just the same. Okay? So that would be my preference. But if for some reason, if you can't scan, so you have a document in Excel, and you have the proposal in Word, and you have attachments in some other format, and you need to send it in parts, do that. But again, label. And then you probably want to have in your naming convention, I'm making this up, so this is where I look to my team to see if they think I'm wrong. But your agency abbreviated name, some part of the name of your strategy, and part A of 3, part 1 of 3, because then we know if we only got 2, we're missing one. Does that make sense? But ideal world, and frankly, if you don't have a scanner and you want to scan something and it's not a burden, you can come to our office, use our scanner. We're glad to help, if that makes sense for you. Okay?
Couple of questions, and don't be afraid to ask more. One, if programming is a year-long project, and this I know affects a lot of youth development agencies in particular, do we need to survey halfway through the year for a mid-year report? So a lot of on the youth development side, a lot of them have school year programming. It is ideal if you can measure twice a year. Part of that is because it gives you a checkpoint, about halfway through. 9 months or a year is a long time to go without getting any feedback back. However, we do recognize that that's not always possible, but be looking at other ways that you do then get feedback throughout the year if you're only doing that official measurement once a year. And then another question is about identifying recruitment, eligibility process, et cetera, for agencies that you might be providing services to. This is in relation to if you're an agency who's collaborating with another agency to provide services. So as you the person coming in, you might be considered even kind of on a contractual basis that you're coming in. Do you need to, how do you reflect that eligibility that the primary agency is responsible for? And I would say that to that, we want you to define in your scope then how you're determining, why is it that you are coming in to provide those services? Talk about that in terms of eligibility and requirements. Does that make sense? I'm not going to ask you to, talk about the primary agency's overall eligibility, but we want to know your scope of services and why you're doing it for that population.
Anything else? Yes?
Do I get a prize for most questions?
We'll give you extra candy on the way out.
On question F3 about leveraged or matching funds, if we don't have that, like I always feel like I should put some BS answer there. So should we just put NA? Should we
Please
just say
do
no?
not.
Or do you want like a nice fluffy sentence?
Please, no fluffy sentences. Really, if you don't have leveraged or matching funds, oh well, we don't, that is not a criteria. It's a piece of information that we're collecting because it does inform the decision making. But if you don't have it, don't say you have it. I would counsel all of you, do not make it up. Do not reach farther than what you do. Because what happens when you do that, when you try and set your work, let's say you say that because I work in the neighborhood, all people will have new cars. Again, if you can't connect the dots between your work and that change in condition, it will call into question the rest of what you are proposing in your application. Please be very realistic, because if people can't see how to get from here to there, they'll think you don't know how to get from here to there. The reality is that we're going to fund the work that you do based on the very specific information you provide about how it changes certain conditions. And I hope what you've heard from us in the last couple of years is that it takes many agency partners to work in any of these areas. None of us can do it alone. So just be really clear about what your part is and write about that, okay? Save sort of the philosophical description of what you do and what you think your overall impact is. Perhaps use that a little bit in Part A, okay? The best place for it, frankly, is at your site visit. People will come and they will be there to hear about who you are and what you do, okay? We assume that you all do this work because you believe that without it, things would be worse, right? People's well-being would be worse. So we accept that part, okay? Again, if you have questions, give us a holler. We're glad to help. And especially between now and the end of December is the best time to get a hold of us. And I think the best time for you in terms of your planning.
And just to reiterate a point that you made earlier, Leslie, the better job that you do in responding in written format to these questions, and then the less that we have follow-up to do in terms of preparing for your site visit and at the site visit, then the more time you can spend at your site visit, really talking to the volunteers more specifically about your strategies rather than doing kind of all that follow-up back and forth. Does that make sense? So really trying to provide you with as much information and ways to think about these questions as we can so we can reduce some of that back and forth questioning.
Okay, this is your last shot for this morning, but not your last shot. So if there are any other questions, we'd be glad to entertain them. Otherwise, I see all of you saying, no, we're done. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time.